When something comes up where a product or service is found to have something dangerous associated with it, sometimes the danger is real, but in many cases it's not. Yet fearmongers will incite people to boycott and stop supporting services and buying goods because of one action or another by the providers of said items. Even if it's not as dangerous as it is advertised, there will always be those who believe these are confounding conspiracies. Welcome to Confounding Conspiracies, the series where I take something a lot of people believe is true and reveal the actual fact behind them. I felt that since it's summertime in the Northern Hemisphere, this one would be appropriate, although I must admit this one may be my most controversial, especially since I'm going to apparently break one of my absolute rules. Yet, I will attempt to write this one and narrate it without taking any kind of political fanfare. So what is the truth behind this controversy? What is the real history of this often cited issue? And what is it that can really be done about this that is so simple, nobody will do it? The truth behind this one may not be accepted by many, but it's something that must be said. So grab a glass of lemonade, sit back, relax, and let's get started. The actual history of climate change goes way back, much further than any human history records. This is easily seen when we consider that global climate change does not necessarily mean heating things up. It is a known fact that the planet has gone through a number of what we call ice ages. It's at this time when the idea of survival of the fittest is brought to bear. There was even a period where the entire planet was covered at least once with ice. But let's also consider another fact. The layers of the Earth include a large zone of superheated materials that always stays fluid due to the heat of the immense pressure. This area, called the mantle, is a vital part of the makeup of the Earth. It reminds us that the crust of this planet isn't solid every time there is a volcanic eruption or an earthquake. So, with massive heat underneath and water and cold above and around, the Earth is always in a state that cycles between warmer and colder. It's as simple as that. In order to understand why this subject is in this section, I must first give you what's called the scientific method. This is what lets us find out actual knowledge of the world and universe around us. The first stage is to hypothesize. This may simply be an observation or a thought that might be an explanation. A hypothesis is tested in an experiment, and the result is then tested again and again. This is because the hypothesis may need to be amended or even discarded if it isn't fully explained. The observation of these experiments is essential to finding the results. When the experiments are found to be working and the idea is refined enough, that's when it becomes a theory. It's then that the experiments are published to the scientific community, fully explaining the process of how the findings are reached, and when other scientists are able to validate the theory, that's when it's considered a fact and becomes a scientific law. Yet, there are many so-called scientists that ignore the point of this process and conduct experiments in order to prove their hypothesis instead of trying to see the results and find if they're valid. I'll give you an example. I found this paper a long time ago and I've tried to find it on the internet, but I can't. Still, the results are kind of telling. These scientists wanted to prove how bad it was to clear-cut an area. Clear-cutting is removing all the trees from a given area for reference. So they tested the water of a stream in the middle of the woods. Then they went to work. They clear-cut the area in question, and then, for the next 5 years, they used defoliant on the area in order to keep anything from growing back. At the end of the 5 years, they tested the stream and found it was severely polluted, so they declared their hypothesis correct, except nobody took into account that the pollution they detected all came from the chemicals they used to stop tree growth. There's a whole list of other so-called experiments that are just used to create a situation instead of trying to prove facts. This is just one. I invite you to research a lot more for yourself. And then there are many who declare hypotheses to be theories without any actual explanation or experimentation at all. And the size of this... Now this might seem a little odd, having an argument in favor of the environment in a video that is telling the truth about human-caused climate change, but I wanted to make something clear. I am in favor of keeping forests stocked with trees. I'm in favor of those who try to get out and plant as many seedlings as possible. I'm in favor of disposing of waste in a carefully controlled manner instead of just dumping it wherever we please. So yes, I am in total favor of responsible use of the resources of the world. I would expect that others would be as well. But what I'm not in favor of is the extremist view called environmentalism. When the EPA first started, the idea was pretty much what I described in the last segment. It was to ensure that responsible use was in play and that renewable resources were renewed. But then they started going on the extremist trend. There is a verifiable truth that the science to see what the climate of the world is not even a century old. In fact, when the technology was first used, they saw the planet as, for some reason, cooling off. And then the cycle reversed. But here's what is very interesting. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have used more chemicals than before any other time in human history. But here's what counts. Every volcanic eruption that occurs puts out hundreds of more pollutants and chemicals than we have put into the air since the Industrial Revolution began. And if you haven't noticed, volcanoes don't exactly keep quiet. There are many extremists that declare the balance of the environment is a delicate system. Yeah, the kind of delicacy you can use a sledgehammer on. Ability to record the environment has come out. There have been many who put out how much we need to get rid of and we need to make sure we never use. I'm not sure how many would even be aware of this, but there have been many times certain steps were demanded over the decades. When I first went to university, and this will tell you pretty much how old I am, the big issue was the so-called hole in the ozone layer. If you weren't aware, this is a layer that keeps ultraviolet radiation from getting through from the sun. But the fun thing is that the greatest supplier to the ozone layer is, in fact, the sun itself. The science is easily discovered if you care to look for it. And here's something else that put a whole lot of questions into it. If it was actually a man-made problem and not a natural lessening of the layer, the hole should have appeared over China, or New York City, or even Los Angeles, you know, places where the population density would make it viable. This actual hole appeared over Antarctica, the continent with the lowest human population. And when it was restored, it was something they weren't prepared to give up on. The use of chemicals that may have contributed were discontinued, and people say that actually helped, but then another bit of ridiculous insight came to light. Before I even get in, I have to do this part, and it's a good one. Believe it or not, the atmosphere isn't mostly composed of oxygen. The largest gas in the atmosphere is actually nitrogen, so we breathe it in as much as everything else. Then there's the oxygen, which is the second biggest amount around, but then something else that has to be described. Carbon dioxide is 1 part carbon, 2 parts oxygen. It's basically adding a carbon atom to any oxygen molecule. The reason this is important is to realize something that certain environmentalist groups don't want you to remember or to even think about. How does the oxygen level stay up? Why do we still have oxygen? It's because plants, those same green things that we see growing all over and eating, use carbon dioxide to grow. The very fact that we have so much green is something that tells us how much we depend on these plants, not just for food, but for the air we have to breathe as well. That's an important point, but here's a simple experiment. You need a hand pump and 2 balloons, preferably from the same package. It's important to remember this. Use a hand pump to blow up one of the balloons and tie it off. The other one, blow up to the same width as the first one with your lungs. Tie it off, then hold both at the same height and let them both go at the same time. Notice which one falls first? So what does that tell us? Now, I have worked in more than a few restaurants in my time, so I can pretty much guarantee this is a fact. The rooms where the fountain drinks are mixed before it gets to the actual fountains don't have a ceiling fan. Given that CO2 is actually not usable by our own lungs, would mean something else if the line sprang a leak. Yet the way to vent these is to open 2 side doors. Now, one last thing to consider. When it comes to the fact that plants use carbon dioxide as a vital part of their continued life cycle, why don't they float? Why is it that, in every case, the largest parts of all these plants is close to the ground? Now really think about this. What do all these points tell us? Now we're getting to the point. In order to run a greenhouse, like the suggested greenhouse gas above, these things have to have a sustainable, thick, and high-up source to collect and warm up the interior. Yet, with what I just presented, it's clear that carbon dioxide is heavier than normal atmospheric air. If it's heavier and the plants actually use it for their life cycles, then how can it be a greenhouse gas? Yet we had a movie from someone who isn't a scientist, let alone an environmental expert, tell us how evil carbon dioxide is and how much we pump into the atmosphere every single day. There's no simple way to fix this problem, or so the movie claims. The only way to really fix it, by the movie maker's judgment, was to impose sanctions on industries that produce a carbon dioxide byproduct, which basically is any industry that actually uses heat and fire. But what if there was a much simpler way? After all, if the so-called carbon buildups do exist, there is a very simple way to fix it. For this last part, I must beg a little bit of indulgence, but you'll see why. There are always groups that go out to replant forests. This is the truth. And there are ways to keep them going, but the biggest contributor to forest revitalization is the paper industry. Now this makes sense. Not only do they want to do the simple repair to the areas they clear out, they also ensure they will have a renewable supply, which is where the idea of cutting carbon dioxide off hits a snag. And the truth of it becomes one where those who go extreme on it cover their ears and hum really loud. Remember how I said plants use carbon dioxide in their way to grow and produce? This process, called photosynthesis, combines the CO2 they absorb with the water pulled from their roots to create the compound they need to grow and thrive. One major offshoot of that is the return of oxygen to the air on the order of 6 times the amount of carbon dioxide taken in. This means the best way for a home to cut carbon production is to have houseplants and gardens. It also means that industries that produce carbon dioxide don't need sanctions, they need woodlands and natural areas. You see, carbon dioxide isn't a dangerous gas that we need to eliminate. It's essential for life on this planet. After all, those things that we consume come from, whether it's 1 step or 2, or however many plants. And those plants want very much to keep producing so that they can be useful. Like I said, it's a simple fix. Although it's not really anything that needs fixing. We moan and wail about how much carbon dioxide is poisoning the planet, but we never think for once that having a potted plant in our living room is helping us to survive because it eliminates the CO2. Now I can imagine a lot of you itching at the desire to tell me off, to say that I'm just full of it. I would point out that I didn't really mention politics directly. But I would ask how many politicians use environmental extremism as a method to get elected, and how many continue to use it as a way to manipulate the polls and tell us what to think about it. I don't want you to take my word for it. As always, I would encourage you to investigate this on your own, finding your own sources, and really to think about this. This is coming from someone who really has no political agenda, and who will get no kickback from any industry or group. This is simply a well-considered and well-thought-out subject that I want others to be aware of. My videos are all about education and entertainment.
So that's it.
All I have to say about that.
I hope this gave you a few things to think about. But I do ask for kindness in the comments. If there are any unkind things, I will have to do something about it. Leave a comment, subscribe up there, check out the links in the descriptions. Over here is one video, over here is another. I have no idea which ones they are. Up there's my social media, and well, that's it for this time. So I'll see y'all next time.